All right, here we go. Today we have Billy McFarland, founder of the infamous Fyre Festival. Welcome to Vlad TV.
Thanks for having me in the hot seat.
Hot seat.
Watched your interviews for, 12 years now, so excited to be here.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Well, a lot of people know about you. There's been documentaries and, of course, the social media thing that happened, but it's your first time here, so I want to start in the very beginning. So you grew up in New Jersey?
Yes.
Okay. And two-parent house?
Yes, grew up in a New Jersey suburb around 40 minutes outside of New York City. So
Millburn, right?
Yeah, Millburn, Short Hills, so pretty regular suburban New Jersey town.
Okay, and your parents were real estate developers?
Yeah.
So were you well off, middle class?
I think upper middle class. They weren't New York City, business people. They operated in New Jersey, but they did well for themselves, but it wasn't anything too crazy.
Okay. So as a kid, were you a relatively good kid? Did you get in trouble?
I think that my childhood and life took a major turn when in 5th grade, I got a computer for Christmas. And this was the exact same time that high-speed internet became available in my suburban New Jersey town. So this is early 2000s. And for me, that computer and the internet became this way to explore the world where no one really knew what was happening quite yet. It was the wild, wild west days. So the boundaries and the rules and the parameters weren't really in place. And I felt like as a 10-year-old, it was up to me to kind of find where those lines were and to push those lines as far as possible.
Right, because you actually started your own social network in middle school?
Yes, in middle school. So I taught myself how to program as a 5th grader, nothing crazy, but good enough to build basic websites. And then in middle school, I built a social network called Your Hot Site to essentially make a private social network for middle school students.
Okay, is this around the MySpace days?
Around the MySpace days. It was MySpace, and then just when Facebook was launching for Harvard only.
Right. And you actually sold the social network.
I sold the social network. So I got in trouble at school. I raised money from 3 of my friends. I was in 7th grade. I remember one day, this kid who only wore Adidas tracksuits showed up in his dad's oversized suit and a briefcase. And he gave me $150 in cash and maybe signed some angel investment form. So that was kind of funny.
Okay.
So I did that. I launched a site, and then the principal called me in. And at the time, people were still scared of the internet, right? Social network was scary MySpace or just for Harvard kids on Facebook. And there was no kind of middle ground. So he called my parents. My parents made me sell it. I put the site online at a 24-hour auction, sold it, gave everybody 3 or 4 times their money back in cash at school. And then long story short, I was applying for college 5 or 6 years later. And it's the third line item on my resume was Your Hot Site. And I'm meeting with the dean of the school. It's some small school in New York. And he pulls the website up. His jaw drops and he turns the screen to me. It was now a porn site. I guess it was bought and sold 3 or 4 times. So rumor was I was starting porn sites in middle school, but it wasn't. And that was a crazy moment. They offered me a scholarship though, so that was kind of funny.
Okay, so you go to Bucknell University.
Yeah, I went to Bucknell.
Okay, did you know what you were going to do at that point?
Thought I would study computer engineering because I like computers. That was the intent. I think I deep down knew it was never going to work out. Went there and lasted almost a year before I left.
Okay, why'd you leave?
I left for 2 reasons. One, I started to fall in love with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu back in high school. And Bucknell is in kind of rural Pennsylvania. And back in 2010, Jiu-Jitsu wasn't what it is now in terms of popularity and mainstream acceptance. There was no Jiu-Jitsu gym in rural Pennsylvania. And the second reason was I couldn't have a car as a freshman, so I couldn't drive to the gym. So what I did was I bought a car from one of my professors who had the same car that I had at home. So I had these 2 Jeeps, and I would travel to Jiu-Jitsu, and it wasn't working out. Blew the money pretty quickly that I made starting these websites in middle school and high school, and just wanted to get back to technology and to build a business.
Okay, but you could have stayed in college. You could have gotten school loans, just because you ran out of money that you already have. I mean, I had loans.
I didn't need cash. I was supported by my family at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
They were paying for my school. But I think I missed the freedom, and I wanted to go out there and play in the playground of the world and not be stuck in this rural environment.
Okay, because you started an online advertising platform called Spling?
Yes, so started Spling during my freshman year of college, and then dropped out because of Spling. And I think at the time I became the youngest person to raise venture capital, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's been beaten many times since then, but that was kind of this moment where, okay, I have real people believing in me, so let's go and try to make this a real thing.
Okay, well, how much did you actually raise?
I think Spling raised $400,000 or $500,000 at the time, then ended up raising a little bit more, over the years.
I mean, that's a lot for a college freshman.
For 18, 19-year-old at the time.
Right, who really has no level of commercial success up to this point. I mean, yeah, you started a site, sold it for a couple $1,000s, but now you're talking about $500,000 worth of investment. How did you convince investors to give you that much money with essentially no experience?
Yeah, it was real. So I think the founding story was pretty interesting. One of my businesses in middle school was a web hosting service where I helped people put their websites online. And I had a really bad fake deep voice, and I pretended like I was an older man the whole time, right? So I didn't want people knowing I was 13 years old in my parents' basement. And one of my customers also was doing the same thing. I had no idea. He was pretending to be an old man. And it turned out he was exactly the same age, and he was this killer engineer and killer programmer. He lived in London. So when things weren't going so well for me at school, I called him up. He was also in his freshman year at university in London at the time. Like, hey, you got to come to America for the first time. Like, let's build a business together. So he dropped out of school, came to America for the first time, like moved in with me. And I think just based on our engineering background and based on the smaller success from the previous companies, we just like hustled, right? And had 200 people laugh in our faces before the first believed in us and tried to make it happen.
Okay. And when you say online advertising, that's like banner ads and that type of thing?
So we tried 3 or 4 things until we found one that actually worked. We ended up creating this content grid that a lot of music artists and TV networks ended up using for their website, where we would take all of their like pictures, videos, and songs and turn it into this like interactive grid where you could hover over it and make the content interactive. So we did like, this is way back when, but we did like the Weeknd's website. We did Def Jam for Rihanna and Drake and like Kanye and all their like artists on Def Jam. So that was kind of cool. But we were young kids trying to make a wave and ended up landing upon some software that was actually pretty cool and used for 3 or 4 years after we made it.
Okay, so you got $500,000 from these investors, but this company went under?
So I fell in love with the entertainment industry, and I think I got lost as a now 21-year-old in the bright lights of New York City. And my peers and my friends were now in their sophomore, junior, senior years of college, around the world. And I'm sitting here in New York, Def Jam's paying me, Discovery Channel's paying me. I'm meeting with these artists, and like I'm taking these meetings and meeting people that I didn't know existed literally 2 years before. I didn't have any friends or any of my friends' families who worked in entertainment. It was more of like you're going to be a lawyer or go work at a bank, and like those are your 2 options in life. So I didn't even know this world existed. And now as a 21-year-old, I'm sitting here, I'm going out with them, like I'm building software they're using, millions of people are going to these websites. And I started realizing that my friends all wanted to like see what this life was like. So I ended up building a company called Magnesis.
Right.
That basically distracted me from Spling. So Spling ended up operating for another 3 or 4 years, but I kind of moved on to the next idea too soon.
Okay, so this was 2013. You're 22 years old.
Yes.
So you start Magnesis. Now, the whole thing about this was this really cool looking metal card. It was like a black card.
Yep.
Right. And of course, the Amex black card was considered the creme de la creme. And I think this is before Amex actually introduced its metal card. I know I have a Amex Platinum, which is metal.
Yeah, it's before they made the
Platinum. This was way
Platinum.
before then, right? So you were one of the first ones to actually create a metal card?
So what happened was like, I think one of the takeaways here, I made a lot of mistakes. One of the biggest takeaways here is that for entrepreneurs, like if you can create your own momentum, that's how you find success. And I think very few people on day one actually know what they're going to build. And most of the successful companies, they end up far different from where they started. So Magnesis ended up far different from where it started. But where it started was that I was trying to build software for, at the time, a very large fashion designer. And I was at dinner with her daughter, who's also my age, and we're all splitting the bill. And I have like my blue Chase debit card with like $100 on it probably. And she drops her mom's, black American Express card. I'm like, what the hell? Like, how do you have this card? So I went back to my Spling office at the time. I was in the second ever WeWork labs. So that was kind of interesting. And I bought a sheet of metal from Alibaba and a credit card copier. So like I literally had this hunk of metal and a credit card copier. And I found this guy named Barry in the Diamond District where he kind of sawed down the sheet of metal to look almost like a credit card. And I copied my blue Chase card onto it. And I went to the pizza place across the street. The guy was like, oh my God, banging on the table. I went out to a club that night. They treated me like I had $10 million and like life was really good. So I started selling to all these entrepreneurs, and WeWork Labs is like black card that could take your red Bank of America, your blue Chase card and turn it into this like hunky status symbol.
Well, okay, I don't know how this works, but how do you copy one credit card into a different card?
It's basically like copying a CD. So you just copy the data on the magnetic strip onto the new card. I think kind of the genius part of it was we couldn't see and we weren't involved in any of the transactions. So we took no credit risk. We took no bank risk. We couldn't see your balance. We couldn't see what you were spending. It all operated just like your original card. So there was no safety or security risk for us. And there was no like new financial information or signups or applications needed for the customers.
So that's crazy. So if you leave your credit card here when you leave this office, I could grab your credit card, copy it, and now have a copy of your credit card.
And they both work.
And they both work.
That's why the chip card was invented.
Right. That's what I was about to ask. So the chip kind of prevented this from happening because what, a lot of people were doing this?
Yes. This became a way for scammers to steal cards.
Right.
So this was the impetus of why the chip card was invented.
Okay. And you got 1.5 million for Magnesis.
I think total raised around 3. The first round was like 1.5. I think that's what was reported. But yeah, raised around 3 million-ish from, I want to say, half a dozen venture capitalists for Magnesis.
Okay. Well, once again, how do you get that much money for, I mean, it's an interesting concept, but it's like, what's the business around Magnesis? Like, you're just copying someone's existing card. Like, how do you make money off that?
So the business became very little to do with the card, and the card became solely a marketing tool. And the business became about the people who are buying Magnesis are young, ambitious people who at the time lived in New York City. We ended up expanding to new markets. But like now our business became, how can we provide better benefits to our cardholders than American Express can? American Express was amazing for the business travel. If you're 40, 50, 60 years old, you're traveling twice a month for business, like we couldn't compete with Amex. But if you were 23 living in Manhattan, Amex wasn't getting you the best workout classes or doing deals with the best bars or giving the best fashion designers. So that's where Magnesis came in. We wanted to build an app that gave you benefits that you or me as a 23-year-old who didn't really fly that much could actually use every day in my city.
Okay, so the card itself, there's no profit off the actual card.
Zero profit,
but once you get the card, you're now part of this club where you offer extra services and what's like a monthly fee?
There's an annual fee, but we also made money from the brands. So for example, Tesla was a big sponsor of ours, and they would do these racing events where they would take the Monmouth County Airport in New Jersey, they would close it down, and they would allow our members to drag race their new cars. So they're like, hey, like these guys in 5 years are gonna be rich, right? They're not quite there yet, but like let's hook them now. So we had dozens of brands who would basically pay us to kind of create these fun experiences for the customers.
Okay, and was Magnesis by itself successful?
Magnesis is doing great. We did well over $10 million in revenue just from our customer fees. This doesn't include like the brand deals.
Really?
And once again, got distracted by Fyre, which we'll get to. But yeah, so Magnesis had done over 10 million in revenue just from customer fees, and like we were profitable for, I would say, 18 months before Fyre started.
Okay, so you have this business that's actually working, right? By piggybacking off of someone else's credit card company, essentially.
But the real value became our customers.
Right, that's what I'm saying, though. So you don't actually have to start your own credit card in a way.
We avoided all those fees.
Yeah, so you avoid the huge overhead of creating your own credit card, which only banks or credit unions could do or whatever else, right? And by the way, was this legal? Are you allowed to legally copy credit cards?
It was totally legal. It was up to the cardholder, like, to copy their information. I think there's a couple of regrets, but we were on the, I would say, 10-yard line of selling Magnesis to, there's two major credit card, networks who aren't Amex, right? Like meeting with both of them on the 10-yard line with one of them to actually sell Magnesis into them. And that would have been, life-changing for my investors and for me, but ultimately fucked it up with Fyre. But that was like one of my life regrets.
I mean, right, because you're making $10 million a year off of just the member services, and the brand deals is bringing how much more?
Yeah. It was bringing a decent amount. So like, I don't want to,
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, you're now in the 8-digit, and was it mostly profit or was there a big overhead?
We definitely had overhead. We were certainly spending on these experiences. I think what was interesting to these credit card companies is if we could partner with you guys and, give you the capital and infrastructure to target the high-earning 23-year-olds around the country, like that's the most valuable demographic. Like, how do we get them before Amex does, right? Like they're in their second year at a great job and hopefully for the next 30 years, they'll be high earners. Like how do we acquire that customer and give value to them today before Amex does in 10 years when they're traveling for work every 2 weeks?
I mean, in retrospect, of course, hindsight is always 20/20. Did you wish you just stayed strictly with Magnesis and didn't try anything else?
I wish I saw it through. I wish I didn't get distracted, spent another 2 years on it, let's say, and just like finished it off.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You could have potentially sold it for, let's say, I don't know, $100 million.
Sure.
I'm just
in the realm of possibility for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's relatively realistic if you're bringing in that type of money and you're talking about financial services and so forth.
Sure.
And then you'd potentially be rich at this point.
But more important, my investors would have made whatever times their money. My employees would have made a couple of dollars. Like, life would have been much might have been a better life foundation than seeing an opportunity that probably was bigger, but then jumping too prematurely to the next opportunity.
Right. And right now, that's not even possible because of the chips.
Correct.
So you can't even start another Magnesis if you wanted to.
So what someone has done, I met the guy recently. He has a patent for basically extracting the chip from your card and putting it into a new card.
Okay.
And he's selling metal cards doing that. He does not sell the community benefits and perks. He simply sells these cards. I think the issue with that is it renders your initial card useless, which I think scares the customer a little bit. But yeah, I think like that marketing tool of Magnesis is dead. The community aspect people are trying to do, like particularly in the NFT, meme coin Web3 world, this whole idea of community, right? I think that's very Magnesis-esque. But the physical card probably wouldn't work the same as it did in 2013, 2014.
Okay, so you're running Magnesis, and I guess someone from Google comes to your office and they suggest that you offer like Caribbean vacations to Magnesis customers?
Yeah, there were two pivotal moments that founded Fyre that had very little to do with Fyre. The first one was we had this townhouse in the West Village in New York, and essentially it was a co-working, hangout, lounge space for our cardholders. This guy came in who was a genius. He worked for Google as a full-time programmer, but he was a part-time pilot. And he's like, hey, I need to meet Billy. I want to fly our members down to the Caribbean. So that started these weekend jaunts where we would take 5 or 6 really small propeller planes and bring our customers to the Caribbean. And like that, just like Spling introduced me to the world of entertainment, Magnesis now introduced me to this world of taking the fashion designer from New York, the entertainer from Miami, kind of escaping them from their reality and having them live for 3 days in this adventurous trip. And that was like the new aha moment that there's more to this world than I ever thought there was.
Okay, and you were paying for all this?
Customers were paying for it.
Oh, customers paying for it themselves?
Yeah. Yes.
Aha.
So we would charge X thousands of dollars, whatever it was. It wasn't too insane, right, to come and spend 3 days with us.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a propeller jet, not like a full-blown private
it's
jet.
Affordable. It's affordable.
Yeah, it's affordable.
Yeah, the owner's not making money off his plane, so actually split it up and becomes surprisingly reasonable.
Okay. And then at one point you started booking musical artists.
Yes. So the next kind of second part of the fate that started to Fyre was we started doing these small concerts as another benefit for our Magnesis cardholders. We probably did 3 to 4 dozen, I would say mini rap shows for the Magnesis cardholders. And that process introduced me to this next step of entertainment, which is more of the talent booking, talent management side. Whereas Spling was more like I was a service provider to the record labels or the TV networks. Now I was actually dealing with the guys on the ground, the tour managers, the road managers, the actual artists themselves. And that was kind of like a new aha moment that I thought I could get involved with and perhaps improve with technology.
Okay, so you said you threw 3 rap concerts.
3 or 4 dozen.
3 dozen?
Yeah.
So who are the artists?
That we use for Magnesis concerts?
Yeah, early on.
French Montana, Wale, Rick Ross, Jim Jones, Ty Dolla $ign, Ace Hood, et cetera, et cetera. It was all the rappers I loved. I just basically booked for these concerts.
Okay, so you would book them for these concerts and you would pay them.
Yes.
And paying them was essentially, and then you would sell the tickets to the cardholders, essentially?
Sometimes we sold tickets, and sometimes it was more of hey, here's a thank you. So, every summer, every Christmas time, we did 2 big thank you events where we had 3 or 4 artists come, and it's hey, if you're a cardholder, it's free. And it's more about let's come together and celebrate the year that we had together. So it's a mix of both. Okay.
So you start doing these bookings, and you just found it was a little tricky dealing with the managers, booking managers, and so forth?
At the time, I had, probably 30 employees. I had really good, supportive, legitimate venture capital investors. We had some budget, right? We were paying fair rates for these talent. And it made no sense to me how fucking hard it was to actually book artists. It's even for the 20th show, we had done it 19 times. The artists were happy every time. People got paid. They always went smoothly. And still it was hard to get in touch with the artists. There's all these middlemen who told me one fee, who told me a second fee. They maybe knew the brother who knew the cousin, right? It was this whole chicken and egg game. And it just made no sense to me as a technology person why it was so challenging for some young idiot like me who could pay an artist $20,000. Why couldn't I get in touch with them to actually make this happen?
Okay, so at one point you decided to do a festival.
Yes.
Now, did you already try to book Ja Rule before this?
So I tried to book Ja Rule for Magnesis. Okay. And I think that was the final nail in the coffin where I went through 3 or 4 people who all told me different prices. And then I finally sat with him and like, ultimately it was a Hamptons event and we need to get a helicopter from New York to the Hamptons event. So I'm in the helicopter with him. You know, I think I'm 22 or 23 now. I'm like, you know, why was it so hard to get this to happen? He goes, oh, I only heard about it this morning. I'm like, wait, what? Like, I've been trying to do this for 8 weeks. And then I said, how much did you get paid? And then I knew the figure, and the figure that he told me was far different from the figure I actually paid, you know, one of the bookers. So,
okay, what were the figures?
I don't want to, you know, repeat what the artist was paid, but, you know, it was, you know, in the tens of thousands, you know, low 5-figure ranges, right? But ultimately, the artist was not getting what the artist should have gotten, and I was taken advantage of by a middleman. Huh. And that was the aha moment. I'm sitting with him in this helicopter, super excited for our like semi-annual, you know, free event for our members. And I'm like, shit, I can build an app that removes all of this and like lets guys like me contact you directly, where you can wake up in the morning and be like, all right, I have 3 offers today. You know what? Sure, I'll go to the Hamptons with my wife for 2 hours for X dollars. Like, let me say yes.
Okay. So do you and Ja Rule talk about him partnering on this app at that point or no?
I think that we started like, I think it kind of clicked uniquely for both of us at the same time. Like, wow, this makes no sense. Like, of course, as an artist, I'll say yes to this. It's a risk-free, fun gig for a couple hours. And like, for me, wow, is it so hard? So we started talking. And I think maybe 2 or 3 months later, he called me and said, hey, we should start a management company together. And like, that got the wheels turning. Like, how can we make it different? Like, fuck a management company. Like, let's build an app that creates like the Airbnb or Ubers for celebrities. And that's like where it all really started.
Okay. And Ja Rule was a partner in that?
Yeah, we were partners in Fyre.
In Fyre?
Yeah.
The Fyre app.
So Fyre app became this booking app that we built together. Correct.
Got it. So now Ja Rule, is he a 50% partner at this point?
Yeah, we were equal partners.
Equal partners. Then of course, once the investors come, then it gets diluted.
Yeah, but we remain equal, you know.
Yeah.
We started at 50-50, but you know, got diluted, of course, over time. But whatever.
Yeah. You'll go to 30-30, 20-20.
Yeah, I think we ended up around 30-ish or 28% each, whatever, when it was all said and done. But we had the equal share.
Okay. Well, this is where it gets a little hazy. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the term sheet that you guys sent to investors for Fyre Media, you claimed that it was worth $90 million. But they say the company only did about $60,000 in business.
Yeah. So here's where I went wrong. And, you know, I fucked up and there's no way around it. I think it started on a, you know, early fall day in 2016. And setting dates here because the timeline just becomes so ridiculous in terms of, you know, money, talent, you know, festival. It's really like an insane whirlwind. It's like the first fall weekend in September of 2016. And the last Bahamas Magnesis trip was like the previous like winter or spring. We didn't do them over the summer. And I'm kind of sitting there like, you know, hungover in my bed in my apartment. And I think I'm 24 now, like eating ice cream, like, fuck, I got to get back to the Bahamas. So call the team, you know, call Ja, we assemble a plane, and then we're back in the Bahamas. And one of the guys who came with us was a childhood friend who had nothing to do with my business. And he said, you should totally, he'd been to, let's say, 10 of the Magnesis shows before. He's like, you should totally do a music festival here for all your Magnesis cardholders. And then like, that's an amazing idea. We can take all of the talent that we're pitching to join the Fyre app, have them come to the Bahamas and do a party on an island. Like, hell yeah. And that's how Fyre Festival started. And in the matter of weeks, that went from an idea to some of the largest talent in the world coming with us to the island every other weekend to kind of create the promotions that the people probably saw.
Okay. And you've done rap shows already, so a festival is not that huge of a leap, at least so you think.
It didn't seem different in my head. Yeah. It's like, sure, we could do 2,000 people in New York City, but I just like, I wasn't smart enough to differentiate like us renting out a venue that's built and does this every day in New York versus building a city, like literally on an island with a population of 5 full-time people. And I couldn't like fathom the difference. Like to me, it's like building a website. Yeah, sure, we can build this website, but like I didn't understand the logistical nightmare that it really was.
Well, Ja Rule had been in the music business for like 30 years.
Yeah.
He understands the difference between throwing a small show and a big festival because he's done both. Did he kind of step in and be like, Billy, this is a cool idea, but, you know, Coachella and Lollapalooza is not a 10-man operation?
So I think what 2 things happened that like allowed this ship to enter this absolute perfect storm. One was it kept pulling off like small mini miracles. Like some investor, some, you know, festival production company would tell us like, hey, it's not possible because of X, right? And okay, we go and solve X. and then not realizing there were still 1,000 more problems that we had to solve. We got so excited that we solved one miracle, which we legitimately did, and it's like I couldn't zoom out. I didn't have the maturity to zoom out and realize it wasn't possible to solve the rest of these. And two is I kept bringing the money in, and money was the ultimate gasoline to fuel this fire, right? And as it became clear that we needed more and more money to make this happen, I started lying to investors to make what I thought would be easier to raise the capital. I think it ended up actually making it harder, but we can talk more about that. But yeah. I blatantly lied to investors to try to raise more cash to try to keep this fire going and actually make the festival work.
I mean, did you consider partnering with like a Lollapalooza or a Coachella and say, hey, we want to take kind of your experience and we'll split the money with you and that type of thing? Or is it, because trying to do something completely from scratch may seem simple, but there's a reason why these companies have been around for 20 years.
I was 24 and I was abiding by this like Steve Jobs mantra where it's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy, where it's like, F them, like we're doing something cooler. Like they're in a desert, we're on an island that's beautiful. We have the most beautiful women in the world. We have the best artists in the world coming here. Like, fuck this, we got this. And obviously that was super naive and wrong, but that was the mentality and you just couldn't tell me otherwise. And I was dumb, young, and hard-headed.
Okay, so originally the Fyre Festival was supposed to be on a different island.
Correct.
This was Pablo Escobar's old private island?
Yeah, so Pablo Escobar's, main pilot was a guy named Carlos Later. I think he was heavily featured in a movie called Below, that Johnny Depp movie from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And Carlos and Pablo bought this island, or bought half this island of the Bahamas, and basically made it their major runway to pit stop before they get to America from wherever they came from in South America. So the island had a lot of history. And then before them, it was the famous pirate Blackbeard's like main hideaway. So I'm like, this is perfect. Like the most famous pirate ever, the most famous drug dealer ever. Now we do a music festival here. Like what better narrative? And that was kind of like the excitement and impetus of like me being naive, like, oh, pirates are cool. Like, Pablo Escobar's cool. Like, let's do a festival here. Not understanding the nuances that obviously went into all of that history.
But wasn't there an issue with that particular island where Escobar's family didn't want to be associated with it or something like that?
So the issue was the current owners who still own it now. It's a wealthy European guy. And he agreed to lease it to us. He agreed for us to have the festival there. And then we ended up dropping this trailer. And I think we had one line in the trailer where it said formerly owned by Pablo Escobar. And then I received a cease and desist in my email the next day where it's like, if you step foot on my island again, you're fucked.
Okay. So that deal was over.
That deal was over.
So now you had to find a different island.
Yes. And I think the best part about all this, and it went totally unreported, is we ended up using another island in that same chain. The island we picked was far more populated. It had 3,000 full-time residents as opposed to literally like 5 on this other island. But we ended up renting the land from a guy named Nigel Bowe, who was Escobar's attorney, and he was still alive, and he was like 95 at the time, and he got the island, or not the full island, he got the land gifted to him from Escobar. So ironically, we still ended up on an Escobar piece of property, however, on a much larger island.
Right, but this was not a private island.
It was not a private island, no.
And wasn't there some kind of sideways sort of advertising that made it look like a private island, but it wasn't really a private island?
Yeah, so the plan always was to do it on this private island, and all of our marketing materials, like we blew our marketing budget shooting this great video, shooting this great content, and that was all about this private island. We ended up changing locations twice until we landed on that final piece of property that we just discussed. So yeah, it was not a private island. It was still a fairly small, 3,000 people. It's not a huge population, right? Still a fairly small island, but it was not the initial private island that was advertised.
Right. And the place where you were actually going to do the festival had no electricity, no running water. It was basically just a piece of land.
Yeah, it was a raw,
on the water, essentially.
There was 2 raw areas. One was this beautiful big raw beach, and one was like a different area that was good for a tent city, or so we thought. And that was the game plan.
Okay, so now you have a location.
Yeah.
Or so you think.
We have a location. We have like 45 days now for the festival. So
45 days.
The biggest honest mistake, and there are a lot of dishonest mistakes to the investors, but the biggest honest mistake was we released this trailer in December of 2016, promising the festival for April of 2017. So that gave us 4 months. The day after the trailer came out, we were told our location is a no-go. So we spent another 2 months finding a location. Now that we finally had a location, we had 2 months to build housing for 4,000 people in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, and the trailer, that's where you brought out the models and everything else like that? Who were the models in the initial trailers?
We ended up using, I think 400 people posted a trailer with this orange tile at the exact same time in December of 2016. And it was kind of like one of these moments where we were doing what people told us couldn't be done, where I remember like coming back from that trip and calling like, the head of IMG, who was like a friend of one of my investors. And IMG at the time was like the biggest modeling agency in the country.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, kid, I took this call because I know you're an investor. I'm like, all right, I want Hailey Bieber, like this person to come to the island with me like next week. He literally laughs me off the phone. He's like, get lost. So I said, okay. So I kind of called down the chain until like, one of the guys like, you know what, Billy, I fuck with you. Like I'll send, 10 of my like best talent to the island. And then we went down, did a trip with them, and they kind of came back and told like all of New York that was the best 3 days of their life. So I think we did that 2 or 3 more times. And then the president of IMG called me back. He's like, Billy, my entire roster wants to go. Like when's the next trip? So it was like the matter of 3 weeks of being told to get lost to, having at the time to come to the biggest supermodels in the world, like there promoting Fyre Festival.
Okay, so initially it was more just kind of more unknown girls.
Yeah, we started at a lower,
lower end.
We
right.
didn't start with the A-list, talent.
Right.
You could say, yeah.
But then you guys got the really, famous models. Kendall Jenner, Haley Baldwin. She wasn't Bieber at the time.
Yeah.
Emily Ratajkowski. Mm-hmm. I always mispronounce her name. How do you say her last name?
I don't know either.
Something like that. Bella Hadid. I saw Chanel Iman. And you guys were doing like the mannequin challenge with all the models and Ja Rule. This was back when Ray Shremmerd was, had the Black Beatles song. And how much were you actually paying these girls to just do this promo?
Good question. We paid, I would say, like 15 to 20 of them, and then we had 380, and like the rest of the balance of the 400 total, do it for free in exchange for 2 tickets to the festival. So I think we first, went with your regular agency and like a regular, working model who works for a regular brand, not like a celebrity model. They said like, listen, this trip was awesome, like super professional, but also like we were in paradise for 3 days. And I think there's something magic to being on this island with 30 or 40 people where you're escaping in New York. Like that was an awesome feeling. And they kind of came back and became our best salespeople to the next rung, who kind of sold the next rung. Then once we had like the mainstream stars there, the rest of the world wanted to be involved. So I think like after that mannequin challenge video came out, we had thousands of people saying, hey, like how can we be a part of Fyre? So our strategy pivoted from, instead of paying people, we said, hey, on this one day, we want you to all post this like ambiguous orange tile at exactly the same time. And in exchange for that, we will give you 2 festival tickets. So instead of money, it became festival tickets ultimately.
Okay, but for example, how much did Kendall get paid?
It's public, so I can say it's $250.
$250,000.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And
great ROI in that, by like.
Well, yeah, it's Kendall Jenner.
Yeah,
she's a Kardashian.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge ROI, right? Like the immediate ticket sales that come in from an involvement at the time, right? It was far greater than $250,000.
Okay, and the other girls like Haley and Emily and Bella Hadid and Chanel.
I don't think it's public, so I'm not going to say.
Okay,
but yeah,
fair enough. Was it around the same amount, or
I don't want to disclose.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's not public, I'm not going to.
Fair enough. But you had like 250 influencers.
Yeah.
So who else were outside the models? Was it all models, or is it?
I think what
social
made
media
the
stars,
orange tile work was everybody, right? Like you're a 25-year-old working at Goldman Sachs in New York City. You pull up your Instagram, your favorite comedian, your favorite NFL player, your favorite model, your favorite music artist. They're all posting this tile at the same time. And you're like, what the hell? Like, how do these people know each other? How are they in the same like stratosphere? And I think that was the real genius behind it, was the confusion as to why all these different people were posting it. So while the models probably ultimately like sold the tickets, it was the combination of them with other like random, stars that really made it go.
Right, and the festival is supposed to host 3,000 people
per weekend for 2 weekends.
So 6,000.
6,000 total, yeah.
So 6,000.
6,000 total, yeah.
Total.
Yeah, correct.
And once again, on a piece of land with no electricity, no running water.
Really smart, right?
on an island with a few thousand people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now you're trying to figure out the logistics
yes.
of how to do this. Now, I guess you paid all the residents money so you could use all their homes, essentially?
Yeah, we assembled a street team who took linens, a camera, and a bag of cash and went and knocked on doors and sent people on vacation for 2 weeks.
Right.
That was literally our genius plan. Let's go send people on vacation and change the bed sheets and take pictures and call it a day. So we did that. We installed, I think, 800 tents. We had a large number of boats that people either brought themselves or that were being chartered, through us to different yacht brokers. So it was kind of like an all hands on deck. How can we make this work? And obviously the simple answer is we should have pushed it back, right? And had I pushed it back 6 months, 10 months, 12 months, it probably would have worked. I think the reason why, and I didn't admit this to myself at the time, was I didn't push it back because I knew I was lying to the investors. And I felt like I had this one chance to make it right. And if I had 12 more months, I couldn't keep the lie up to them. So I was like, we can make this work, and we're going to have to make this work in 2 months or 6 weeks, whatever the time frame was.
Okay. And how much money did you have at this point from investors?
I think Fyre total probably raised 30 to 40 million. I think 28 of it was over the course of 4 months. So it was really fast. And that does not count whatever ticket revenue we had, whatever sponsorship revenue we had, right? That was just the investor side of it. So it was definitely a pretty insane cycle of, cash in, cash out, to try to make this dream a reality in such a short period of time.
Okay. And 30 artists were supposed to perform.
Correct.
Blink-182 was the headliner.
They were one of the headliners, yes.
One of the headliners. And what, Good Music was the other headliner?
The headliners were Blink-182, Good Music, which consisted of, I think their label's bigger, but 5 or 6 artists we had, agreed to from Good Music.
It wasn't Kanye, though.
Was not Kanye. We had hoped he was going to come,
just to show up.
Who knows?
So Pusha T, Tiana Taylor.
Designer, Tyga.
Tyga was on Good Music?
Yeah, he was on Good Music.
Was he? Okay.
I forget the rest of the lineup from Good Music. It was 5 or 6 of them. Major Lazer, it was the DJ group, and then Disclosure. Yeah. So there's the 4 headliners.
Diplo's group. Well, but you also had Ray Shremmerd.
Yep.
I just interviewed Slim Jimmy recently.
Nice.
Migos.
Yep.
Lil Yachty.
Yep.
Skepta from the UK. And were all these people paid in full?
So there were 30 artists. 28 of them were paid in full.
No, let me stop you there. As someone who does bookings, and so forth, I never want to pay people in full ahead of time. I paid DMX in full, then he died. So
Understood.
You never know what's going to happen when you pay people in full. And of course, his estate owes all these other promoters money, so I'll never see it. Why not pay people half and then half on the day of the show and so forth?
I think everybody knew I was a 24-year-old kid with supposedly had an island in the Bahamas. So I think, I was certainly getting taken advantage of in some respects too, right? It's I was easy, quick money for a lot of talent at that point.
Okay, you're almost like a lick, kind of,
for sure.
for some of these guys.
So just to answer your question, of the 30 artists, 28 were paid for both weekends up front. The other 2 were paid for the first weekend and not the second weekend.
But everyone was essentially paid in full.
Everybody was paid in full for the first weekend, and 28 to 30 were paid for the second weekend. Yeah.
When I hear it out,
I think we paid $5.3 million to the artist total.
$5.3 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And they actually got paid, and that's I think highly underreported, right? That wasn't the scam. The scam was lying to the investors.
And they all got to keep their money, right? The artists?
Some of them were sued eventually. I don't think anybody gave back more than 10 or 15% total. I think that's being aggressive, but most of them kept all of it.
Okay. And I remember there was this toast that you and Ja Rule had with a bunch of the people around.
So embarrassing.
Living like movie stars, partying like rock stars, and fucking like porn stars.
I think those are the kind of things when you're 24 and you're having a lot of tequila. It sounds like a great idea. Now that I'm 32, looking back on it, I'm like, oh God. The poor people in the background, looking at us, what is wrong with this guy?
I'm sure Ja Rule's wife's looking at this, shaking her head also.
I'm shaking my head now. So. It's not my brightest.
Right. And some of these packages that you were selling were up to $250,000, where you had a private yacht with a chef. There's other packages where you'd have private homes.
Yeah.
And these packages, in 48 hours, 95% of the tickets got sold out.
I think what happened was we put a $250,000 ticket, almost as a joke. We did have a real plan to provide a package that was far superior than the cheaper tickets, but we didn't expect anybody to buy it. and someone bought it like, within an hour. They're like, all right, like let's put a $500K one up as a joke too, and then someone bought that in an hour. So
you sold a $500,000 ticket
package. So it kind of became this thing where like we didn't think this was going to happen, and then like they started selling, and that was wild.
I mean, this is insane when you really, the fact that someone would spend $250,000, or actually $500,000, on a company that's never done this before, that doesn't really have a real history of shows. I mean, yeah, you've had your smaller shows, but not on this level.
Nowhere near this magnitude.
Nowhere near this magnitude. It's really just kind of insane.
I think what made it happen were these trips that we did so many times with Magnesis and like eventually with the models and with various Fyre artists to the islands. Like in a way, there were many Fyre festivals, and obviously 30 people was a far different operation than 3,000 people. Yeah. But we did these mini Fyre festivals, and they would come back and say how great they were, and like that was our sales pitch. So yeah, we had done it right on the small scale, and it's like it just didn't have the ability, and I was lying to investors, to scale it up by 100 times.
Okay, who were buying these $250,000 and $500,000 tickets?
Yeah, I think surprising people, right? And like, once again, not going to drop names here, but we had a finance guy in Texas that every week would call us and be like, hey, I want to upgrade my package. And like, and just like run his car for their $100,000 to like get something else. And like, great guy, he never asked for his money back, which is kind of wild.
Okay.
But a lot of it was like, the who's who of the finance and tech world. And I think one of the biggest like moments where like we really fucked up was the day of the festival. There was a large marina there. We didn't build the marina, but like we had rented out, a large portion for the festival. The number of very well-known A-list people who were pulling up either on their yachts or yachts they chartered or yachts of some billionaire they knew who didn't have tickets. Well, like that's when the investors looked at me. It's like, you really fucked up, right? Like that was the profit right there. And there was dozens and dozens of like the who's who of the world is like pulling up in their boats like the day of, unannounced. So,
or so they think. So they think, right? Because originally, wasn't there supposed to be like a cruise ship that you would just kind of park next to the island and everyone would kind of live in the cruise ship?
So we talked about cruise ships for months. Obviously, that would have probably solved our problems. Right. I thought it was too cheesy. I wanted to make it as high end as possible. We ultimately ended up booking a cruise ship for our festival staff. I think like just showing how stupid I was. Like, all right, we think we have the housing figured out for all the guests. Now it's like, Billy, we have 800 people. Like, where the fuck are they going to live? Like, all right, get a cruise ship now. So we got a cruise ship for our staff, and that actually worked out. So that probably would have worked if we had done that for the guests too.
Right. And you guys were going to use tents.
Yes.
But I remember one of the guys that was helping with logistics, in the documentary on Netflix, he said that him and his wife tried to stay in one of these tents, and it was just unbearable. Mosquitoes, it was way too hot. These tents were not going to really work.
The tents didn't work out well.
Yeah.
Not for lack of effort. I mean, like, listen, it's like, it wasn't right, but I spent literally $1 million on tents. I spent, I think, like $980,000 on Amazon on a credit card buying mattresses for the tents. So like just the intentions were, as stupid as they were, the intentions were correct in this area of it. But obviously, like if I had the ability to zoom out for 24 hours, it would have seemed ridiculous. So.
Well, I remember, because me and Ja Rule, we go back like 20 years.
Okay.
And I remember he called me one day leading up to this, like, yo, got this huge concert we're throwing. If you can get to Miami, we'll fly you private out to the island. It's going to be dope. I said, oh, shit, okay, cool.
I didn't know you were, that's amazing. Did you come or no?
Well, the week leading up to this, because I'm living in L.A. at the time, I'm calling Ja Rule, and I'm like, yo, where is this thing still on? Where should I go? What's going on? And he's not returning my calls. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to just fly to Miami and just wait for him to hit me back. So I'm like, all right, well, at the time, I'm like, oh, he stood me up. No diddy.
Okay, I had no idea you had a first-hand account. Crazy.
Yeah, but in retrospect, I'm glad that he stood you up. That he did stand me up, right? But yeah, no, he literally invited me, to this thing, and
I'm sure he did. Yeah,
and suddenly went ghost.
Yeah.
So now we're leading up to the actual festival itself, and Ja Rule stopped returning her phone calls, also, right?
No, he had a concert the night before. I want to say in Chicago. I could be wrong there. I think he had some kind of like small show in Chicago, and his plan was to fly in the day of. And that night before was when all hell broke loose. So yeah, he missed it by 12 hours or whatever it was.
So he never showed up.
He never showed up.
Okay. Because you had all these houses, you sent all the residents on a trip.
Yeah.
but there's a guy with all the keys to the houses, and I guess the guy disappeared, or he lost the keys, or
yeah, I think like it's. I was ultimately the one at fault for everything, and like I hate passing the blame, but that motherfucker who got rid of those keys, man, like that crushed us. So when we literally chartered 2 737 jets. We set up a Fyre terminal in the Miami International Airport, and we were flying guests, to the island every hour on these planes. When the guests would arrive, we would try to separate them. All right, like general admission, go to the tents. If you're going to a boat, or go here. If you're going to a house, go to this line. And this wasn't like latchless key fobs here. There's like a box of physical keys in a cardboard box. And I think after the heat ratcheted up, the guy who was in charge of those keys just like disappeared with the keys in the spreadsheet, and that was a tough moment.
Right, because there was like 800 people that were working on this, and most of them were residents of the island.
Yes. Yeah.
And then a storm hits the island the night before that essentially destroys the tents.
Mm-hmm. A storm came in the night before. Like you couldn't have scripted this in like a horror movie any worse. And we have an intern whose dad was like one of our major investors, and we give the intern a key, and there's like a giant, I forget what they call the trucks that carry the containers, like one of the giant trucks, right?
Yeah.
Like he's like a 17-year-old kid. He gets in the truck, and we spend all this money and time building our water system, and he runs over the water line. So he knocks out the water. So like now the drinking water, the bathrooms, the bar areas, like all the water to the entire like came down to one source, and they like literally just like crushed it with the trucks. Like, oh fuck, like this is happening. The storm's like going away, and like it wasn't his fault, right? It was like there's like 20 things that all kind of happened at one time that just collapses.
Well, speaking of water, you had an event producer named Andy King. Who did an interview for the Netflix documentary.
You should have at least applied us at Evian for the interview today.
Who was openly gay.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the government officials on the island wouldn't release the water unless he got paid, what was it, 100,000 or $1 million or something?
Something like that. It didn't make, I think the fee was more than the water cost or something, like whatever it was at the time was just not adding up.
So was the official gay as well?
It was unclear. It was definitely unclear.
He was kind of zesty, is that what you're saying?
I think I learned about this in jail a couple of years later. This prison guard came up to me and he goes, "Yo, McFarland, did you pay some like government official or did you pay some guy to suck some government official's dick for water?" I'm like looking at him like he's crazy. He's like, "You could tell me." I'm like, wait a second. Like that's how I learned about this whole story. So I'm like try to get entrapped by some prison guard. I think the story was Andy King went and basically said, "Hey, I'm willing to blow this guy to release the water." He didn't actually blow the guy, but the water got released. So
well, I mean, according to the documentary, you called him and say, "Listen, you got to take one for the team. And you got to blow this guy for some water," and he agreed to do it.
I think the story is a game of telephone. I think I called someone. I talked to Andy about it, the past year. I think I called someone who like called Andy. He's like, "Billy said you got to go suck this guy's dick." It was a game of telephone. But the best part of it, Andy didn't question it. He goes, "Okay." He's like, "What time do I have to be there?
Where's the dick at? All right, I'm ready.
What time do I have to do
it?" So you're saying you didn't tell him to actually get it?
No, I didn't tell him to go and do it. But I think the word was changed 4 times, and it became that word to him. And God bless Andy, man. He just said, "Okay, what time do I have to go?"
Oh yeah, listen, I don't think this guy has employment problems after this because he's clearly willing to go above and beyond his job.
I mean, if one of your team members want to do that, then that's...
Yeah, no, you got to keep him on staff.
It's hard to find these days.
I mean, so you and Andy actually spoke later on?
We spoke recently, yeah.
And how did that conversation go?
It's good. I think I think the hardest part for Andy and watching Andy is like people who don't really research into it think Andy was part of this scam, right? And the actual festival itself wasn't the scam. The scam was me lying to investors, and Andy had absolutely no interaction or, he wasn't involved in the fundraising. He was there trying to make the festival actually work.
Yeah.
And he busted his ass, and the festival failed not because of him, but to see him being labeled as a scammer, I think like that hurts the most. And like that's probably like he's a victim, right? Because he's being labeled as a scammer for something he didn't actually scam. So that sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the documentary again this morning. I watched it initially when it came out, but he basically was trying to say, like, look, I understand there's a lot of problems, but there's a lot of problems when Woodstock originally happened in the 60s or 70s where, yeah, like the cars were all jammed up and people couldn't get in and a lot of people died from drug overdoses and it was all muddy and messed up. But no one ever talks about that because Woodstock is still an iconic event that they redid later on and people still talk about it today. So I'm just going to try to make it happen and hopefully it'll be another Woodstock. Yeah. But it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, he definitely was trying. It seems, based on his...
He wasn't even like, I forget what his deal was. He wasn't even getting paid that much money. It wasn't like he was doing it because there was this huge paycheck for him. He legitimately believed in it, as did 800 other people, right? Like some were in it for the money, obviously, but some truly believed. And I think the one thing that is misreported too is like for all the wrongs and all the lies I told, which wouldn't have mattered in this case, we were closer than reported, right? Like yes, the tents were imperfect, but like there were still brand new beds, there were still carpets, like they were still like livable, right? Like no, the houses weren't perfect, but they still would have been okay had we figured it out. It just like too many things went wrong too quickly, and I didn't have the management experience to handle that storm when it came.
Okay, but I've seen the videos, the documentary, and of course the documentary is going to paint it a certain type of way, but when you see the people arrive. Mm-hmm. It just seems like absolute chaos because there's no electricity. It starts to go dark and it starts becoming pitch black. Everyone's fighting over limited resources. They bring in everyone's suitcases, but on a big truck, a big container, and everyone's scrambling to get whatever suitcase might look like theirs. And people are walking around with big, pallets of toilet paper and it just looked like Lord of the Flies, essentially. I mean, is that a fair assessment like that night?
I think I made one decision in the morning that killed the festival. The plane started, so the storm was the night before. The storm ended at some point early in the morning. The plane started arriving at sunrise that morning. And the festival site where the tents were, where the main food, restaurant, bar areas were, where the main stage was, it wasn't ready. So I said, fuck, we can't have people come here right now because it's destroyed from the storm. We need a few hours to set it up. So I sent everybody in buses from the planes to a beach on the other side of the island where we basically sent all the liquor, sent the jet skis, sent the boats and said, all right, open bar, everybody go have fun, like hang out here while we actually try to build the festival site up. And by the time they came back, it was pitch black, everybody was drunk. We didn't actually fix things well enough and it kind of became mayhem. I think had I let them come at 7 or 8 a.m. when they were sober and calm, we could have worked things out. So like ultimately, like that was my last bad decision that led to the Lord of the Flies chaos.
Right. So this is happening and there is a lot of chaos, but the world doesn't really know about it yet until the cheese sandwich photo. I remember when it hit my radar, it was that photo.
You're like, thank
and
God
I was
I'm
like,
not there.
Oh, thank God I'm not out there. Thank you, Ja Rule, for not returning my phone calls. Thank you.
That's funny.
So I guess this was billed as like, oh, there's going to be all these chefs and it's all luxurious and everything else like that. And people get this plate with a piece of cheese on a piece of white bread and, and it just goes viral at that point. It eclipses all the other, viral photos and videos you've done up to this point. When that, cheese sandwich photo becomes viral, what did you think?
I just remember, the cheese sandwich actual story is something else. And Andy King told me the real story there in the past, year and a half. I didn't even know until recently. But I just remember I'm standing on this milk carton, and I haven't showered or slept probably in 3 days right now. I'm in like an oversized long sleeve shirt in the sunny Bahamas at this point. People are surrounding me and yelling at me. Then I have someone give me the phone, and it's a reporter from not TMZ, but a well-known tabloid.
Vice?
No, I don't want to say who they are. And they've been kinder in the recent years. But they said, Billy, we're about to report that you ran away from the festival on your yacht with a bunch of models and cocaine. And then someone else showed me on their homepage of their website, they were live streaming me standing on this milk carton. So I'm like, listen, guys, like on your website, you're live streaming me on the phone with you right now. I'm clearly still here. They're like, no, we have solid sources, so we're going to report that you ran away with cocaine and like models on your yacht. And like, it was that moment where I'm like, all right, I have no control. like this thing has just become far bigger than I know how to handle. And yeah, whether it's a cheese sandwich or the fact they're reporting I'm running away in a boat, like it just like became like this cultural-driven moment where the truth became less important than the salaciousness and ridiculousness of what was happening.
So then on Thursday night, you officially canceled the festival.
Yes.
How much time from the people arriving to the cancellation had passed?
So people started arriving at sunrise on Thursday morning, and we canceled it, I would say, sometime around midnight on Thursday night. So 14 to 16 hours.
14 to 16 hours. Right. So then all these people are trying to get back home, and it's a disaster, essentially.
Yeah. So I remember the moment where the decision was made, and we had a plane coming from Miami to the island that was full of passengers. And somehow through like air traffic control, we got looped into the pilot. And he's like, "Are you confirming that I'm turning this plane around in the air?" And like, that was the moment I remember. We turned around a 737 and like, yeah. And then he's like, "It's going to be mayhem in here, but you got to do it." Sorry, man.
Well, it's better than them landing and then adding to the mayhem on the ground.
And I remember that was when the final decision was made, and there was no turning back from that.
Okay, so now you officially canceled the festival.
Yes.
You fly back to New York on Sunday.
I get back to New York. Yeah, so the festival's canceled Thursday night. I get back to New York like midnight Sunday night, super late. Yeah.
Right. And the FBI is at your door at 5 a.m. Monday morning.
Scariest moment ever.
Right. Didn't your doorman offer to help you kind of escape?
Yeah, I got a knock on my door, and it was a mess. And like, it was bad. I could knock on my door. It's my doorman at 5 a.m. It's not a good sign. He goes, "Billy, the FBI's here. I can get you out." And I'm like, "The FBI? Out? What do you mean?" Like, "No, I'm all good." And he goes, "Okay, well then you gotta come meet him." And then he wouldn't let me get in the elevator because he didn't want them to see what floor I was on because he told them I lived on a different floor. So he's like, we gotta run down the stairs and get in the elevator on this floor and then go down. So we did that and then met them in the lobby, and the rest is history.
I mean, were you surprised? I mean, did you think that you didn't do anything wrong and this was just...
Yeah, I was definitely surprised. There was a moment on Friday morning, so the morning after the festival was canceled, we're trying to fly people off. And one of my investors calls me with 10 instructions, right? And then I can't do 9 of them. It wasn't possible. And then 8 or 9 hours later, I call him back and he goes, initially when he called me, he said, "Billy, if you don't do this, you're going to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal in handcuffs." And I'm like, "Handcuffs? What do you mean handcuffs?" I'm like, my mind is spinning right now. I can't comprehend what he's saying. And then I called him back 8 or 9 hours later, Friday night, and he said, "Billy, sorry, it's too late." So I didn't know what he meant, but obviously I committed a crime, right? So I'm sure he's a well-connected person who tipped someone off, was like, "Hey, this guy's lying."
Well, yeah, on top of it going viral and the whole internet is sort of...
It was obvious that something was not right happened.
Right, so then you get arrested.
Yeah.
This is the first time in your life you've been arrested?
They didn't arrest me yet. They basically came and served me with subpoenas that day.
Okay.
And their initial questions that day were like, "Hey, we don't think the festival is real. So we think you stole money from the festival," which wasn't the case, but I lied to investors. So, they served subpoenas that day, and then I think I was arrested maybe 6 weeks later. It was pretty quick. It was probably 6 weeks after that day.
Okay, so you get arrested and you make bail.
Yes.
How much was bail?
I had to give, it was technically a $300,000 bond, but only $50,000 in actual cash.
Okay.
Not literal cash, but $50,000 in money, and the rest I signed a bond.
Right. So you had the money to actually make bail yourself, or you had to get someone to do it for you?
I had $50,000 at that point. I think it had to come from a third party. I think you couldn't use money that you gotten illegally or whatever it was for it. Yeah. So I think a third party had to put it up for me, but I'm not exactly sure where it came from. Yeah.
Okay. Well, at one point, I guess after the FBI came to see you, your lawyer got a call from Ja Rule's lawyer.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And Ja Rule's lawyer said they were offering Ja Rule a proffer agreement.
Yes.
Now, for those that don't know, a proffer agreement means you sit down with law enforcement and you tell them everything that you know, and you can't be charged with anything that you tell them, unless you're lying, of course. Mm-hmm. But that only applies for that day. If you choose to incriminate yourself later on, you could get charged. But that day, you can fully cooperate and not be charged with anything yourself.
Yeah, so I didn't know what it meant. And I just remember my reaction being, "Oh, let me call him." And he's like, "You absolutely cannot call him." He's like, I just remember the one line he said, "If you call him, then I can't represent you anymore." And, I had no money to hire more attorneys. This is my guy, right? And my life is in this attorney's hands. So I think he did as good of a job as he could have with an idiot like me. But Yeah, I think that's what happened. I think ultimately probably all of my employees went into proffer. I know the FBI, when they served me with subpoenas, they went to my office, they went to the house of like my assistant, like they definitely my top 20 employees. They went to all of them, and just based on reading the documents, I think every single one of them probably went and proffered, which it sounds crazy, right? Like I think I understand, because like ultimately I was the one lying to investors, and these other people weren't lying to the investors. So yeah, I mean I was the guilty one, and like if I was a young person or someone with a family too, like I wouldn't now, having gone to jail and like been through that period of life, but I think at that point of time I understand why they did it.
Okay, because Ja Rule never showed up to the island, right? I mean, after the festival was supposed to start.
No, so he had a concert that like Thursday or whatever the night before the festival was supposed to start was. So yes, he didn't get there in time.
Okay, and then by the time he found out what was happening, he was like, I'm not going.
Yeah, we couldn't I think like our accounts got frozen like as soon as the cheese sandwich hit the internet. like literally our bank accounts are frozen within minutes. So it's like you literally couldn't even afford to fly people in at that point. And that was like a wild experience.
Well, you made a comment about Ja Rule. You said incredible person, a super charismatic guy, but when the shit hit the fan, he'd already been to jail. So at the first chance to cover his ass, he did.
Yeah, I think like as a business partner in that time frame, he was a killer in a good way, right? He's an incredible salesperson, extremely charismatic, likable by everybody. And I think that Fyre started as a tech company, right? And like the challenge of a venture capital backed tech company is hiring the best programmers. Like that's like you're all competing for the same, 500 people in New York who can make the best apps and websites. This is in 2016, right? And like he was an incredible person to recruit this talent. If someone's choosing between Google and Amazon, like all of a sudden Fyre comes in and here's this like super successful rapper who makes you feel like $1 million. Like now we have a seat at the table where we ordinarily wouldn't have that seat. So I think he was incredibly effective there. I really liked him. I think we were close friends for 3 or 4 years, whatever it was prior to Fyre. So, as a person, definitely like him a lot.
Well, I mean, I guess the question is, if you guys are 50-50 partners, shouldn't both of you have to take 50-50 responsibility for what happened, or did you do something that he didn't know about?
So I was the one lying to investors. I was like such a bad criminal. It's not even funny. Like people kept asking me, like particularly in jail, oh, was there like a back room? Was there 2 set of books? Like I was the most open and stupid criminal of all time. I think there was, for the 2 months prior to Fyre, I never had my own like credit or debit cards in my pocket. There's probably 20 people who had the passwords to my bank accounts. Like if I needed money, I would call someone like, hey, like, wire this person money, like whatever it was. Like, right, I never had my own money. Like all my accounts were open, but like I was so open, but I was also lying at the same time. So I think no one really questioned me because it seemed like nothing was being hidden. But to try to raise capital, I was lying about the success of the business to investors, and like that was solely on me.
So, I mean, like in retrospect, do you feel that Ja Rule really didn't have anything to do with it and shouldn't be charged with anything? Or do you think he has some responsibility and he got off by cooperating?
I mean, that's such a hard question. I think my feelings have changed on this time and time again. I mean, like, I don't think he had more culpability than some other people might have had, right? I think if at a 10 out of 10, I had a 10 culpability, and maybe there are some others with 1 or 2, but it was like so overshadowed by my culpability.
Okay, because at one point you offered to fight him to box him over the money that was owed.
Yeah, I had an offer, and I did fighting 4 weeks ago now from today, almost 4 weeks ago, which is top 10 life experience. But
right.
I had an offer from a great promoter who would pay back the balance owed to the Bahamian workers for
which is how much?
For Ja Rule to fight me. It's low. It's like $250,000. So like relatively low in the grand scheme of things, right?
I mean, I know Ja Rule. He's pretty big. I'd probably put my money on Ja Rule. He'd probably beat your ass. I mean, no offense, but like I said,
if I lost, I would have no shame, right? Like if we could do one night, and like that $250K is amongst a few hundred people, and like some of those people need it, some don't as much. But like if we can go literally change 50 people's like lives, right? I think this was around a holiday. Like it would have been amazing. And to go and do that if I lost a fight, like who cares? Like that would have been a fucking awesome moment. So yeah, I challenged him for that. He didn't take the fight, obviously. I ended up fighting somebody else, but yeah.
Right, because you and Ja Rule were sued for $100 million in a class action lawsuit.
Yeah.
What ultimately happened? Well, because he gets dropped from the lawsuit, right?
I was in jail. So the lawsuit started right after the festival. And then I think it really picked up steam when I was in jail. My only real memory was they would have like the local, I was in federal prison, but they have the local town like sheriff come to serve me the lawsuit papers every like time there's an update in the case, like whatever, every 6 to 8 weeks. So, I'd kind of like see it then. I don't know what the final outcome was, but the ultimate penalty is like $1,000 or something. I think like the judge basically said, they're wrong on 90% of it and like gave them 10% of the counts for them. And it was like a super small penalty.
Yeah, I actually reached out to Ja Rule before this interview to try to get him on the phone and maybe get, maybe some info that's not out there. And he just responded, come on, Vlad, I'm not into the goofy shit. And that was it. Couldn't get him on the phone. Yeah. And that's that. I mean, I don't blame him, but, it's my job.
Well, let's step into the ring and see the goofy shit then.
Okay. Well, like you said, you're ultimately arrested and charged with wire fraud.
Yep.
You get released. And then initially, you had to move back into your parents' house?
No, I never. I think that was another media story. No, I never moved back with my parents. But yeah, I was released. I was certainly, had very, very little to nothing at that time. But I was still living in the city.
Right, but you're out on bail, and according to some of the people that you were working with, on the Fyre Festival, you were telling everyone that you're definitely not going to jail. Mm-hmm. Did you really believe that you weren't going to jail?
I think so. I think I was. So they arrested me late on a Friday night. And so I spent that Friday night in jail and, was released the next morning on bond or bail, whatever it's called. And I was scared, right? And I'm like, I saw the people in jail and I'm like, I'm nervous. And like, this is really me. Like, did I do, like, I was confused. As a 25-year-old kid now, my world collapsed. I think I went from like the biggest noticeable difference was like the day of the festival and the months leading up to it. I'd wake up to 1,000 emergency texts, phone calls, emails every morning. And now I wake up and there was nothing, right? My phone was like as if it didn't work. No one would respond to my text. No one would respond to my call. I was like literally living in like in silence. And it was like the weirdest feeling ever. And I'm like, this can't be real. And I was lying to myself and I was behaving poorly. But yes, I was obviously wrong.
Okay, because then... Well, at one point you were living in a hotel or a penthouse or something like that after this happened, and you started to assemble another group of people with a company called NYC VIP Access?
Yeah, and this is, I guess, another one of the top 2 or 3 embarrassing moments of my life, I think. I was on bail, I needed money, and one thing that Magnesis had done well prior to Fyre was doing these great experiences for our customers, right? I'm like, okay, I can get back to that. And I was clearly wrong, but I deluded myself into thinking that I could still get tickets or get access or even be invited to some of these events that I, may have had peripheral access in the years before. And so I started selling them. And it was fucked up and it was wrong and there's no excuse for that.
Right, because you were offering people dinner with LeBron.
I didn't know about that one. I was definitely offering ridiculous things.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I heard someone mention that,
okay, I didn't know.
Which you can't really pay for.
No, yeah, I do.
You can't. LeBron way too rich to have some random have dinner with him. I was not
aware of that one.
Right.
Can I bid for it now?
Met Gala tickets, which once again you can't just buy. Anna Wintour has to personally approve everybody. Taylor Swift meet and greets, which she does not do. And then other stuff like, Madison Square Garden floor seats and, Golf Masters tickets and stuff like that. And I guess you were using the Fyre mailing list to hit people up?
Yeah, I definitely used the Fyre email list. I think like the premise is true, is that I was selling things that I probably couldn't get. I don't think I was selling LeBron James dinners, but I think that sounds like a documentary story. However, the premise is wrong, right? And I was behaving like an asshole. And I think ultimately I probably got 3 or 4 more years in jail because of that.
Huh.
I probably got more time, like in isolation, probably got more time for that than Fyre Festival, because it was that behavior that was like, oh wait, like maybe he is a scumbag, and like so I think that really changed my fate.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you got about $100,000 from people with these new schemes, essentially.
Okay,
is that right?
I'm not sure. Yeah, it was
somewhere around there.
Tiny in comparison to the Fyre Festival
right.
investor.
But still people's money for services that you were not going to carry through on.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess around the time of the festival, you borrowed around $7 million with an effective annualized rate of 120%.
Yeah.
which you defaulted on. So then the lender sued you.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially the judge forced you to file for bankruptcy. Or the Fyre Festival company to file for bankruptcy.
The Fyre Festival company, correct, file for bankruptcy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So now you have that on top of the Fyre Festival.
Mm-hmm.
And you're facing 40 years.
Yeah.
You're, 26 years old?
25, 26, yeah.
25, 26 years old. They're essentially telling you you're going to get out when you're a senior citizen.
Yeah.
What does that do to a 25-year-old's head?
I couldn't fathom even I think before the ticket thing came, my lawyers were like, listen, Billy, you're going to jail and you're probably going to do 2 years. Like the charges carry a maximum of long periods of time. I think they're always using that in the press. Like my lawyer's like, you're probably going to do 2 years in jail. And I heard that 2 years, I almost fainted at that meeting. And I think at that point in my life, I was literally living by the hour, and particularly in this lead up to Fyre Festival. It's like, will I have enough money by 2 o'clock to stay afloat? And now somebody tells me 2 years? I couldn't fathom that much time. And I just got so scared. And ultimately I was sentenced to 6 years, 3x that, largely because of the tickets. But yeah, I think that meeting with my lawyers, remember in their office, hey, you have to call your family, you have to call your friends, you're going to jail. And I'm like, what? Are you guys serious? There's nothing we can do? And yeah, there's nothing we can do.
Right, because this is a federal case?
Federal case, yeah.
Right. 95% conviction rate?
Yeah.
I mean, Ja Rule beat him back in the day, but that was also...
I was guilty as hell.
You were guilty.
Yeah, there's no, you couldn't even fight it. I gave fake numbers. There was
right.
There's no defense to that. I was guilty.
Well, right, because when you plead guilty, you don't really know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
You could still get your 40 years.
Yeah.
So when you heard the 6 years, was it a sigh of relief or was it worse than you thought?
No, I thought I was going to get, I can be honest now, I thought I was going to get 4 after the fact. All right, you're going to get 2 before. Now I think they're going to double it. You're going to get 4. So I thought I was going to get 4. And then I heard the 6. I'm like, fuck. I started doing the math. Now I'm 26. I'm 32. I have a cousin who's 32. They're so much older than me. You start breaking it down to basic human relationships and thoughts, and that fucking scared the hell out of me.
Okay, so now you go to prison.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, your first day of jail, they gave you a cheese sandwich.
They did.
Was that on purpose?
On purpose.
What did you think when you saw the cheese sandwich?
I thought it was a joke. Can I actually get the hamburger? They're like, no, you're sticking with the cheese sandwich. I'm like, no, but really, can you get the hamburger? They're like, no, you're sticking with the cheese sandwich. It took 10 minutes for me to realize it's not a joke. I'm like, oh, I understood.
You gotta hand it to him. At least they have a sense of humor about it.
It was good.
I'm sure at the time it wasn't funny, but now it's funny.
I ended up becoming close to the guy who actually who
gave you the cheese sandwich.
Gave me the cheese sandwich, but he was a nice guy. But yeah, it was I really thought they were joking for 10, 15 minutes. Guys, but for real now, can I eat? Nope.
Nope.
It's all over. Kitchen's closed.
Right. Well, you also got a lifetime ban to serve as a corporate officer or director.
Of a public company.
Of a public company.
Yeah.
So you could do private companies, but not public. But you never were a corporate officer in a public company.
No, never was.
So
yeah,
kind of like a whatever.
I hope I have that issue, right, where my next business is doing so well that becomes a big enough for that. But.
Yeah, I mean Martin Shkreli, I think, had the same situation.
Got it.
Yeah, and you guys were locked up together at one point, or in the same building,
we were in
or something.
Same halfway house when we were released. I think our schedules were different, but the same period of time.
Got it. And you also have to pay $26 million restitution back to the original investors on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess one of the investors wrote a letter to the judge recommending a life sentence.
Crazy.
When you heard that, what'd you think?
I think that there was one investor who spoke at my sentencing, and I think it was that investor. And now I recognize, but at the time I was angry because I never met him before. I didn't know who it was. I'm like, who's this guy speaking? And oh, it's one of your investors. And then I think he gets up and says, during all my meetings with Billy, I'm like, I never met with this guy. He's lying. And he was lying, but that took away from the real purpose of it. And I spoke about this, at length recently. But I think a lot of the real victims were people I never met, right? They were a family member of an employee. They were, someone else who's paying legal bills to support someone who's now roped into the situation. So I think ultimately a fraud crime, the victims aren't necessarily the ones who lost money. They are the victims, but the victims are, friends, associates, innocent bystanders. And I think it took me 8 years after that sentencing day to really realize that. So I think at the time I was mad, like, this guy's lying. But now I'm like, I fucking get it, right? Like, he was brought in by somebody else, and sure, I never met him, but he was still as much of a victim as anybody else.
Yeah, he lost money.
Yeah, lost money, for sure, yeah.
Right, because you have to pay back $26 million.
Yeah.
How did that sit on you? Because that's essentially, for most human beings, if they're lucky, way more than their lifetime earnings.
Sure.
Knowing that, I mean, how do these things work? I mean, they can't take all your money. They have to leave us something for you to live off of.
So I pay the way it works is fairly straightforward. I pay a percentage of my income every month to restitution. So,
can you say what the percentage is?
I can't say.
Fair enough.
It's significant. It's
significant.
It's a burden, and and it goes up based on different kinds of earning. So if I have to travel to earn it, it basically becomes almost all of it. If I'm earning in here, it's not as much as that. It's like there's nuances to it, so it's not like just always a flat percentage. But it's a huge burden. It's significant, and ironically, it's also expensive, right? Because to pay. I'm basically doing the accounting of a public company for my personal finances, right? I have to pay accountants and auditors to verify what my income is. And so it's expensive just to have the right to pay the restitution. So it's a burden in more ways than I initially thought it would be.
Yeah, well, I mean...
Yeah, it's part of the punishment. Yeah.
I mean, it's supposed to be punishment.
Yeah, not complaining, but I'm saying it's a burden in more ways than just the money.
Well, and a lot of the influencers like the Kendall Jenners and the Bella Hadids, they had to speak out about the whole thing. And
I think the one thing that really pissed me off during this whole process, and once again, I'm clearly the worst actor here, is one of the Fyre subsidiaries was forced into bankruptcy, and that bankruptcy sued some people to get money back. And I think they sued people who actually did work, right? And they didn't sue other people who didn't work. So I think they sued the wrong people. So I'm sitting in jail, seeing on TMZ every 6 weeks, oh, Kendall Jenner sued, this person sued. I'm why are you paying suing the people who actually did their work? And I think they clawed back $1.2 million. And they kept 1.18 of it for legal fees. So basically, it's
so the lawyers got paid.
So the lawyers got paid, and no one else got paid. That pissed me off. It's that's not how it's supposed to work, and that's sad to see.
Okay, so here you are, 27 years old.
Yeah.
And you're going to prison, real prison, federal prison, for the first time.
Yeah.
You've never really been locked up before. And now you got to deal with prison politics and so forth. What was that first night like?
My first night I had a Spanish cellmate, and he kept asking me what I did. And I didn't know, I actually learned some Spanish in jail. I didn't know much Spanish at the time. I knew dinero was money. I didn't want to say a money crime because that wasn't going to be good. So I didn't know how to describe, my crime. So I remember that being my first fear. He's like, hey, what happened? I'm like, I don't really know. And I don't want to say dinero because he think I have money. I have no money at this point. So that was a weird, that was my first, this shit's fucking real, right? This guy's yelling at me in Spanish, asking me what I did. I don't know how to tell him what I did.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as what he probably thinks I did, right? So it's how do I navigate these waters?
Okay. And wasn't Mike the Situation from Jersey Shore?
Yeah, so he was, and then I was transferred to initially a what they call a camp, which is a minimum security place, with the Situation, and then Michael Cohen too. So that was
Michael Cohen, who was Trump's lawyer?
Trump's lawyer, yeah. We're all at the same place at the same time. So they had their hands full for a few months.
Okay. But now you're actually in real prison.
Yeah.
And now you're having to deal with prison politics. And prison a lot of times is separated. I mean, of course you have the gangs, but then you also have the racial lines. So you got the Nazis and the Aryan Brotherhoods, and then you got the Crips and the Bloods, then you got the Mexicans and the Latin Kings and so forth. How are you navigating through all this? And you're also kind of a celebrity because of all the media attention.
I learned how to respond to the question of what you is. So I think that was the first question everybody asked.
What was the answer?
I mean, just independent, I'm nothing, I guess is the way to say it. It was hard. At that place where I was with the Situation and Cohen, there was none of that there, but I didn't last very long there. I ended up going to 4 or 5 places where, progressively worse and worse. I think the biggest culture shock to me was probably the racial divides, where it's literally the line to get food. It's all right, Hispanics here, blacks here, whites here, and you can't break that line. And it felt like it was 80 years behind what Manhattan was as a 25-year-old. And that was the hardest part to me too, is I think stepping on people's toes who probably were in jail for 30 or 40 years and they view the world as one way, and like me arguing back, like why? Like why are things done this way? So it took a few months and a few situations to fall into line, I guess, if you will.
Right, because you're actually approached by some older white guys with, swastika tattoos, and they told you could only hang out with other whites.
Yeah, exactly.
And is that what you actually did?
No. So no, it didn't work out well. They just said I could only hang out with them, and they said I had to pay them $150 for services provided to me. I'm not sure what those services rendered were. And I had a cellmate who was Indian, not Native American Indian, like Indian.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, we were locked in. He's like, listen, they either want $150 or they're going to fight you. What do you want to do? And he's like, I'll give them $150 if you need me to. And he's a super nice guy. And, I didn't want to set the trend and like me giving money. I'm like, I'm new. I'm like, let's fight them. He goes, I knew you were going to say that. So he had already prearranged this. He had told like the head of the Crips, who I was friendly with, what was happening. So as soon as they unlocked the doors, the head of the Crips, he was giant human, like biggest man I've ever seen. He runs to my door. He's like, yo, Billy, come to my cell. I got something for you. So he comes and grabs me. And then I guess they come in and and then my cellmate goes and fights them for me. So he fights them for me. He's all bleeding and like, putting over the floor. I come back in. I'm like, what the hell happened? And his name was Patel. And and so he fought them for me. And they're like, well, if this like random dude's willing to fight him for him, like we don't know what's going on there. So we're going to stay away. And that kind of, yes, he helped me really early on. So crazy moment.
Was that the only potentially violent situation you were in?
I think there's like other like little things, but that was a time where I was like truly scared. Like, sure, I was scared multiple times in the future, but I think like it was so new at that point where I think the newness of it, the ridiculous of the situation, like straight out of a fucking movie, the guys like the swastikas in their foreheads, right? Like that was the first time in my life I'm like, wow, like I'm truly don't know what's going to happen now.
So you never paid for protection?
No.
Okay. But then there was another guy who actually did pay for protection.
Yeah.
Tell me about this story.
Yeah, that's in the same facility where Patel was, as Brooklyn Detention Center, where Patel and I were. He comes in, it was another, like, we used to joke that if you were white and had no tattoos and all your teeth, you're a child molester, right? Because that's like generally what it was, okay. just to be honest. So he comes in and he has all of his teeth and no tattoos, and he's like probably my age, some white kid. And like, oh, Billy, your brother. They're all like, laughing and making fun of him, right? And he pays like that day. I think he was on drugs or a drug addict, and he finds himself in trouble within hours of getting there. So now the rumor is he paid some guy for protection. So that guy moved him into his cell, and it was a cell next to mine. And that night, you just heard him getting raped, and like him screaming and him crying, and that was like. And like we all had buttons in our cell for like you can click for emergencies. And I'm like, do we hit the button? And Patel's my cellmate. He's like, Billy, you can't hit that button.
Really?
He's like, you can't do it. It's like, like whatever. Like you try to protect that kid now. You're fucking me over. You're fucking yourself over for the rest of your bid. As he said, like this will stay with you. Like you can't tell the police anything. And that was like the next fucking like mind fuck moment.
So you're hearing this younger white guy getting raped.
Yeah.
Right next to you.
Right next to me.
And I guess he can't get to the button.
Yeah, he can't get to it. Yeah.
And nobody else. So other people are hearing this.
They hear it. And then the worst part is the next morning when they let the cells out, and now the rumors spread fast, right? Everybody knows what happened at this point. And so rumors are getting around, and then like he's scared to tell on the guy because they're like, oh, if you tell him, we're going to kill you. So he just goes and convinces the police to move his cell. He's like, I have to be in a different cell, right? So he goes into a different cell. We lock in the next night, and then the doors open early in the morning at some point, like let's say like 6 a.m, right? And like I'm still sleeping in bed, and all I hear is help me, help me. So the guy who raped him was embarrassed. So as soon as the cell's doors opened the next morning, he took a razor blade and went and slashed the guy the next day.
In the face?
I didn't see him. So they dragged him out and never saw the guy again. I just heard from my bed, the screams woke me up. So it was like, fuck, the guy got raped one night, is too scared to tell people he's in danger, somehow convinces them to switch where he's living, and then the guy now is embarrassed, so he goes and slashes him. But
did the guy get arrested or charged with anything? Who slashed him?
They took them both away and never saw
them
both
away.
Again. So yeah, there's no idea what happened to him.
What was the race of the guy who raped him?
He was a black guy.
Okay.
Yeah. Didn't know him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine that. I've always said this in my interviews. I watched the movie American Me when I was in high school, and when I saw the rape scene, I said, I'm not going to prison. So whatever I do, I don't want to be in that position. And
Yeah,
to
it was
hear your
terrible.
story is just,
I think, thankfully, that was the only time that I saw or even heard about real rape. There was a lot of consensual sex that was going on.
Was there a lot of gay inmates and stuff?
A lot of gay inmates, and you would see things you didn't want to hear and see all the time. You'd hear rumors, people making fun of them. Like that was totally a thing, but that was the only time where I saw non-consensual.
Yeah, no, I mean in prison.
Yeah.
I remember I interviewed Terrence Gangster Williams. He's Birdman's brother.
Yeah.
And he said that around 30% of the inmates experiment with homosexuality in prison, especially if they have long prison terms. If you were to guess the whole time, because you spent how many years in prison?
23 years, 10
23 years. So almost 24 years. What percentage of inmates experiment with homosexuality at some point?
I'm going to say 30%.
30%, and 1 out of 3.
Yeah. 30%.
That's a big number. And, I hear stories of, weddings going on in prison.
For sure.
They throw rice and there's a whole ceremony and, there's transgenders.
A lot of transgenders.
There was a lot of transgenders?
I was after the prison I was at with the situation of Michael Cohen, I was transferred to this other place in Ohio. And I think my second or third night there, I hear over the loudspeaker, the Dungeons and Dragons tournament's happening now. And I start cracking up. I'm like, oh, that cop's hilarious. Everybody's looking at me like I'm a fucking idiot. I'm like, no, he just made a funny joke in the loudspeaker. I thought he was kidding, making fun of us, right? But he was for real, and that's where all the transgenders went to
play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, so I thought the cop was joking, and people were all looking at me like I had 10 heads. Like, oh, it wasn't like this at the last place. I'm looking around.
Right. Well, at one point, you try to start a podcast while you were locked up.
Yeah.
Then you get caught.
Yeah.
And then they put you in solitary for 7 months.
7 months in solitary. So I did a podcast at the same facility.
Is that illegal though?
No, it wasn't illegal. I think that was kind of the worst part. I signed to a production company from jail for the podcast, and they released a trailer. And in the trailer, they used a stock image of a guy in a jail cell. And his hands were kind of down on his head, and the guy looked just like me. It wasn't me. So they thought I had a cell phone taking these stock pictures. So they came and grabbed me an hour after the trailer came, put me in solitary. They realized in a week that I didn't do anything to break the rules. And I think that infuriated them even more. And hey, if you just had a cell phone, we'll let you go back out. But now that you didn't break the rules, but you really shouldn't be doing this. We don't want media attention to our jail, right? So it's kind of it broke the nature of the rules, but didn't actually break a rule. But now Suge Knight's doing one, right? And they're kind of supporting it. So I was like, who the fuck knows? But they weren't happy. Went to solitary for 7 months for that, and then was transferred to a different jail outside of Detroit.
Oh, I mean, I've interviewed lots of inmates from jail. I've interviewed R. Kelly.
Oh, really?
From jail.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
No, it's legal to make a phone call and to have the phone call recorded. And I'll even tell the person I'm recording the phone call. They're like, no problem. And every so often, this call is being recorded by an inmate of...
You've done it, yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing illegal about it. Multiple. Yeah, I've probably done. I mean, the guy who killed Michael Jordan's dad, I interviewed him in prison.
Okay, I didn't know. I got it.
Yeah, there's nothing illegal about talking to someone, having them record it, but knowing that the prison also has a copy of that recording as well.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
But, yeah, I don't... I'm trying to figure out what the crime is, and I guess
I was found not guilty. They had an internal
hearing.
Internal hearing, exactly. I was found not guilty. But still did the 7 months. I was found not guilty after 7 months.
So did you have a cellmate in solitary, or were you by yourself?
I would say back and forth. For half of it, I didn't have one, and half of it, I had one.
Okay. What was it like to be completely solitary?
I think for up to 2 weeks, it's better to be alone. And this is my takeaway from it after doing 7 months in that stretch. For up to 2 weeks, prefer to be alone. After that, you need somebody. Both of the pros and cons, right? Living, eating, shitting 2 feet from another man it's not a fun way to live life. But I think after 2 weeks, you just start worrying about the most extreme possible outcomes of everything in life, and you have no soundboard to bring you back to reality. That I think being alone for a certain period of time for too long, it's hard to kind of come back from.
Yeah, I remember I interviewed Michael Franzese,
okay,
who was a former mafia
familiar with the story,
captain. Yeah. And, I asked him what the worst part of prison was, and he said solitary. He said humans are just not designed to function that way. And I have friends who, I would get to know them as they're coming out of prison, and you could tell there's sort of this weird kind of disconnect they're almost like detached a little bit from reality from doing too much solitary. So I've seen this kind of thing. I mean, it's definitely a form of punishment.
You just worry, like, the guard slipped your food tray at the door. Oh, he looked at me the wrong way. Does that mean I'm in even more trouble? Like, what did I do now? Like, like everything becomes like a monumental crisis, right? Like, oh, I didn't get a letter today from my family. Are they dead? Like, did they die in a car crash? Like, everything you think the extreme, and that's what gets really, really scary.
Yeah, and I guess at one point you had a cellmate in solitary.
Yep.
And he had a colostomy bag.
He didn't have the bag, so they called him Bags, ironically, because he had his colon shot out from the police. Didn't have a bag, so everybody called him Bags, and he would literally shit every 30 minutes around the clock.
So you'd have to smell this.
Every 30 minutes. It's like no exaggeration. Just.
I mean, it is prison.
So what happened was my lawyer was complaining that I was in solitary for the podcast for not breaking the rules. And they're like, oh yeah? We'll make it not solitary now, McFarland. And they threw Bags in there. Oh, you think you're funny? You have a lawyer? You think you're cool? I got here's Bags. And that was yeah.
Okay, so then in 2019, you're 28. You're still in prison.
Yeah.
Netflix and Hulu released documentaries about the Fyre Festival. You've never seen these documentaries?
No, still haven't.
Is it you just can't bring yourself to actually watch it?
Yeah, I think I'm just not mature enough.
Yeah.
Or like I would just start bitching about things that aren't really important, right? It's like, oh, I didn't know him, or I didn't know her, like, and ultimately, like, I fucked up, right? It didn't matter who said what.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in the media, things are out of your control. People do little mini documentaries about me, and I watch them, and I'm like, okay. I mean, it just is what it is.
You get mad,
yeah. I mean, you put yourself out there, and you got to deal with people interpreting, their own versions of your life, and that's just it. And then while you're locked up, EHL, which I guess was one of the people that gave you money, they sued you and they won a default lawsuit against you for $2.8 million. Okay. Was that because you couldn't show up to court, or?
I was guilty. So I think they were one of the investors for sure.
Okay, but you could have shown up to court to fight it, right?
I could have, yeah.
But you did.
Yeah, at that point it was just.
So what's the point?
Yeah, what's the point? Yeah.
Okay.
Just you can't spend your last dollar fighting every case at that point, right?
And then the private island actually hit the market. Was this which island was this? The one they actually?
So this was a small island. Just detached from that Escobar Island. It wasn't the main Escobar Island. It was like a little version of it that we used for a lot of the marketing shoot, and actually sold, I think, partly because of our promo. Yeah.
$11.8 million.
Yeah. So I think they sold. So they probably like us now, right?
Right. Ja Rule gets dismissed from the $100 million lawsuit, and ironically enough, he started an app called Icon, which is an app for talent booking.
Like Icon people, or?
I don't know. Or Icon, like
I'm the
Icon.
Yeah.
I would think it's that, but no, I don't think he's conning people. But,
Got it.
But it seems like it's the same general idea as the original Fyre app of booking celebrities. How do you feel about that?
I think the idea behind Fyre was really good. I think in reality it will take, it takes a lot of money to acquire all the talent buyers out there, to have all the nightclubs know about you, to have all these private buyers know about you. So I think it's a business that requires a lot of capital and a big team to do. I don't think it works on a small scale level. If you're just like being another middleman on the phone, you're not going to go very far, in my opinion. So I think it's a hard business to replicate like that. I mean, like, he started at 7 years ago? Has it done anything? I don't know.
I don't think it was that long ago. I think it was a few years ago.
Okay.
Remember he was telling me about it.
Okay.
Over text.
It's a hard business, so yeah.
Yeah. So you don't see it working out?
I don't see it working out.
Okay. And you guys haven't talked since then?
No.
Okay. Grant Margolin.
Mm-hmm.
What is his association with you?
The most talented person I've ever met in my life.
But he was a partner? Or,
he was an employee.
Okay.
He rose to probably being the most senior employee. I had the privilege through Magnesis and Fyre of meeting a lot of, very successful business people who, whether they were advisors or mentors, or I got 30 minutes with them. And I think no one was as impressive as Grant. And like, that's one of those things where like totally makes you feel like shit, where, he got a lot of unwarranted backlash after Fyre and just hasn't been able to recover from that. And that fucking sucks. It's like, I feel like I stunted that trajectory of someone who would have done crazy things in this world.
Right. He got barred for 7 years for being a director or an officer, I guess, for a public company. $35,000 penalty, but he didn't admit or deny any SEC charges.
Okay.
Who is Seth Crossno?
Once again, don't tell him. I think he's the person who had like some anonymous Twitter account.
Okay.
Am I getting it right or no?
Well, he got a $5 million judgment against you.
Oh, so maybe it's somebody else. Okay, I don't know.
So you don't know who that is?
I don't know. I've heard his name. I thought he was the guy with the anonymous Twitter account, but I might be confusing them.
No.
Yeah, okay.
But are you aware that you're supposed to pay him $5 million?
I think I've fought back on all of the cases that I wasn't guilty on. So I'm not sure what the status there is. There's a lot of like these little local ones around the country that unfortunately a large part of my income goes to fighting right now.
Right. 2020, COVID hits.
Yeah.
You try to get a compassionate release.
Yeah.
You didn't get it. You catch COVID. That next year, 2021, Fyre Festival actually reached a $2 million settlement in the class action lawsuit.
Okay.
So are you on the hook for that $2 million or?
I didn't even know.
Okay.
Yeah. I think like the reality is there's probably 5 dozen, ongoing things that, my lawyers for better or worse are dealing with. And so, yeah, I think like if I get caught up in the weeds of every single one, I couldn't make progress. And the only way that I'll be able to repay people both with trust and with money is to work and build something, right? So I'm trying to like focus as much as I can on moving myself forward and then getting proper help to, make good on what's actually owed.
Right, because didn't a fellow prisoner sue you for $650,000?
Yeah.
Over fraud?
Yeah.
What's that over?
I think he abandoned his lawsuit. I think it was like a 15-minute of fame grab for him.
Okay.
But it was a child predator who lied about that, who was trying to woo me with gifts.
Okay.
And then once he found the truth out, just said, hey, we're not friends anymore. And
okay.
I think he did a lawsuit, but didn't actually do the lawsuit. Like never served me, never
Got it.
proceeded with it.
What did he give you?
He tried to buy me a Sprinter, and then like when I was on home confinement, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And then like his entire case was sealed except for one file.
Huh.
And then that one file basically, if someone found it, sent it to me, and that was the end of the story.
Okay, so then in 2022,
Yeah.
age 31, you get released from prison after serving 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, I thought the feds was 85% or...
So you get 85% of, you get up to 15% off for what's called good time. Mm-hmm. So I think I got like 10 months of good time-ish off the 6 years, right? I lost 1 month and then got for punishment. And then Donald Trump passed the First Step Act, which, while I was in jail, which gave first-time nonviolent offenders a year off. I was literally woken up from my cell 2 months before I left jail, thinking I had another, year and some change left. And like, McFarland, your date changed, you got a year off. And like, whole world was turned upside down.
Yeah, sure, it was a great
I had no
day.
idea what was coming. Like, we'd follow the news every day about the First Step Back. We all thought it was bullshit. And then like, all of a sudden your name is called and it's real. So that was a surreal moment.
Okay, so then you walk out of prison
Yeah.
after 4 years. How did that first day feel? Because you went into a halfway house, I guess?
I went to a halfway, so I was in a jail in Michigan, outside of Detroit. I went to a halfway house in Brooklyn. So yeah, I took the long drive from Detroit to Brooklyn, and
that is a long drive.
it's kind of a long drive,
Yeah.
right? And it was definitely a surreal feeling. I just remember the moments like walking into the halfway house, like how am I turning myself back into jail? Like after all this experience.
Well, it's better than the other jail,
And
I'm sure.
Ultimately, the halfway house was totally fine, and like there was nothing. I think they were professional, smooth. I had zero complaints, but yeah, it was definitely a fucking mind blowing experience.
Okay, and how long were you in the halfway house before you get fully freed?
I was in the halfway house for 4 or 5 months.
Okay. And you had to, get a job and stuff like
I
that?
had to get a job, yeah.
What was your job in the halfway house?
I'm not going to say his name, but a very big music artist hired me to help work for him. So super nice guy. Yeah.
Probably not Ja Rule, though.
Not Ja Rule, no. Great dude. I called him from the car. I hadn't spoken to him in 6 years, whatever it was, or 4 years, sorry. I called him from the car, driving from the jail to the halfway house. I'm like, hey, X, I just got out, I need a job. He goes, all right. He said, write yourself an offer letter and, show up tomorrow. So great dude.
Okay, so then you decide to start a new company called PYRT,
Yes.
pronounced Pirate,
Yes.
which of course, I feel is almost a tongue-in-cheek reference to
A little bit.
to the Fyre Festival and the Blackbeard and
of course,
Bahamas.
Definitely Blackbeard. And
Yeah.
so, Pirate's basically my like creative marketing agency. Do marketing work for a handful of like venture-backed startup brands, working on some like little technology side projects through Pirate as well. So it's kind of like my creative pay the bills thing, while of course working on Fyre long term.
Okay, and you actually got a permit for a hotel in the Bahamas?
Not quite. So
Not quite?
having a hotel in the Bahamas or somewhere else in the Caribbean is definitely a mission of mine for sooner rather than later, but it's in process.
Okay, and you're actually planning another music festival?
Yeah, we're doing Fyre too.
You're doing Fyre
We're doing Fyre too. So
you're serious?
100% serious. The big difference this time is that there is a festival production company who's actually in charge. So there's like a 51% controller of Fyre 2. That's not me. They're going to do the logistics for it, and I'm doing the marketing. We're doing it at some point next year. They're actually doing their site visits starting like in 2 weeks in July. So we will have final date and location this summer. And yeah,
They say you've already sold tickets?
we did a pre-sale last summer.
Okay.
Sold out in like 28 hours.
How many tickets did you
Kinda
pre-sell?
Cool. Just 100.
Okay.
But then we put up, last winter we put up applications. We didn't collect any money for these. Put up applications for $1 million ticket. We've had over 100 real people, we like to say, apply for the $1 million ticket. So I'm not sure how many of those actually close when it comes down to it, but that was kind of surreal to see.
Okay. And you owe the IRS $6.8 million in back taxes?
Personally, yeah.
So how much do you owe total?
Good question. I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. I think that's the...
I mean, is it tough to kind of, work on businesses and make money knowing that a big chunk of it is going to go away?
So I think it was like it's harder and easier in different ways. I think when I first got out of jail, I expected the process to be nearly impossible. And I think it was actually fairly smooth, and the system actually worked the best that I'd seen it work to that point, right? Like it allowed me to work, it allowed me to make back reasonable payments. I think as I've started to make more money, and the numbers aren't crazy at this point, but as I started to make more money, then it's become like nearly impossible, right? As soon as the money gets real, then people come out of the woodworks. Then the attorney fees go up, the accountant fees go up, the auditor fees go up, the law, everything starts getting more and more difficult. So ironically, like it's harder now that I'm making 10x what I was when I first walked out of the door. So it's like it's not easy. It sucks.
I mean, do you expect at some point to fully pay back everybody?
For sure.
For sure.
For sure. And like my argument to, my creditors, if you will, is right, like the best chance of this happening is to allow me to operate. So no matter like what you guys want today or tomorrow, it's in all of our best interest to allow me to work, right? And make these plans feasible. So I can work for 7 years to pay people back. If I'm losing money by working, I'm still going to work, but like it doesn't make a lot of sense. So like trying to figure out the balance there.
Yeah, no, the legal system is a weird place.
Yeah.
Like, I've had Instagram models post crazy false stuff about me, and I'm looking at it going like, I can't do anything with this. I can't sue her. She probably doesn't even have a bank account.
You're gonna spend,
So you're
spend $40,000 suing her.
exactly
and get nothing.
to get nothing in return because she doesn't have a bank account.
Yeah.
And she makes cash off doing God knows what.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a weird situation. So I mean, if they want their money, but then I'm sure it's pretty hard to get venture capital at this point, considering your track record with venture capitalists.
Yeah, so my income now is two streams. It's one, marketing work, so I'm basically paid as a marketing consultant.
Service
like
business.
a service provider.
Yeah.
And then two is just off of like the Fyre, brand. So there's a Broadway musical being produced.
There's a musical being produced.
I'm filming another documentary TV show.
Okay.
Right? Like I get paid to go on podcasts. I get paid for cameos and other TV shows. I'm not paid to be here, to clarify, but get paid at least once a week to do a podcast cameo in some capacity. So yeah, it's like
good.
It's not not gonna buy the island right now, but it's enough to to step in the right direction.
Well, Trump came to the Bronx recently.
Yeah.
And Chef G and Sleepy Hollow were on stage with him. And were you somehow involved in that?
Yeah, I think through Fyre, just I love bringing people together. And I thought the idea, and this was the first presidential rally in the Bronx since Reagan, and I thought the idea of bringing drill music to a presidential rally would go crazy, and it did. So, pretty cool moment.
So, are you working with Trump?
Not working with Trump. I'm just always doing fun moments. So, I brought Kodak Black to his birthday party 2 weeks ago in Palm Beach. That was fun.
You brought Kodak Black to Trump's birthday party?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago in Palm Beach, and then I brought out PZ, Icewear, Vezo, and Side of Abe in Detroit the day after that. Yeah, so it's cool. Just like, I think like, love making these moments, right? And it's like when different people come together, you know.
Okay, you're behind all this stuff.
Yeah,
all right,
so
that's kind of cool, actually.
It's cool, right?
Yeah,
it's like cool
I'm
moments.
I'm gonna salute that. Yeah, no, I like that.
I love when Chef G and Sleepy Hollow are on stage in the Bronx, and Trump's like, "I love those girls." Like, how do I get those? I think that was like a historical, cultural moment. That was great.
Well, Billy, man, it's a hell of a story. And look, you made a lot of mistakes, but you took responsibility for all your mistakes. At no point in this interview did you paint yourself as a victim. And you did not point the finger at other people and, oh, it's really his fault and I was just, fooled or whatever else. You took responsibility. You did your jail time. You have to pay your restitution. And ultimately, you deserve another chance to see what you could do with the rest of your life. You're still, a very, very young guy. You're, 32 right now?
Yeah.
32. You have a long life ahead of you, and everyone makes mistakes. And people have turned their mistakes around. And, people have gone bankrupt. People have gone to prison. People have done, Michael Milken.
Yeah. Look what he's done.
He's a billionaire again. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You see a lot of people
trying to cure cancer. Like it's like different level of
exactly. Trump has filed bankruptcy a bunch of times. Like a lot of bad stuff has happened to people who ultimately became successful. So I'm glad that you're still pushing along. You don't have to do interviews like this. You know what I'm saying? Or you could do an interview and say, well, I don't want to talk about the Fyre Festival.
Yeah.
No, you came in. There was nothing off limits. Clearly there's certain things you can't talk about legally, and that's fine. But, I respect you coming in here, man. And honestly, I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Vlad. And for Fyre Festival, too, I will not avoid your calls the week before. So.
Okay. I'm like, Ja Rule help me.
Yeah.
Honestly, if I had gone out to Miami and flown out there with a cheese sandwich.
You would not be sitting here with me right now.
No, I would not. It'd be a very different interview. But hey, man, listen, you became part of, pop history. Mm-hmm. And it is what it is at this point, man. I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
No doubt. Peace.
Thanks, guys.